about you and your is dealing with people's credit report and their credit score. But before we get into that, Chris, just tell me a little bit about you and your family.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak with you today and your listeners and your viewers. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Chris Bridges. I'm married to the awesome and wonderful man of God, Fulton Bridges. We are parents of 5. They're ranging from ages 23 to 3, so continue to pray for us. Our oldest just graduated from the University of Towson, and our daughter has just finished getting potty trained.
There you go.
So I am a consultant and credit coach with Nirvana Credit Services, and my purpose and mission, quite honestly, Ray, is to educate and raise the awareness of the impact that our credit score has on our lives, and making sure that people understand the importance, and especially in today's economy, the importance of our credit and being able to make sure that we know what it means and how we need to maintain it.
And because in this, we're hearing about the bailouts and, all those things going on in the credit and the housing industry and all that. And I know in the African American community, we haven't been educated on a lot of these things.
Correct.
And even quote unquote educated people don't necessarily know about this area and this credit and these credit reporting agencies and all that. So that's what we're going to talk about in this 100,000 point challenge, and how the information that Chris is going to share with us is going to help you increase your credit score to be part of that 100,000 point challenge. So Chris, just go ahead, talk to us about this whole, where does credit come from and these credit bureaus, and we hear about these things. Talk to us about that.
Well, one of the biggest things I think that people don't understand is that the credit bureaus, and there are several, but there are 3 main credit bureaus. It's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And one of the key things that I tell my clients is that they're not nonprofits. Unfortunately, they're not consumer advocates. They're not out here necessarily for us. They don't work for the government. And they're not any type of subsidized, organization. They are for-profit companies that are out there that are basically repositories, and they earn their money by being paid by creditors to report about us, about our payment history, and several other things.
So these companies, so how did they get to do this? Why couldn't I have done this? So, where does that come from? The fact that these companies establish themselves and have, they sort of dominate, I guess, the industry. What's sort of the little background on that? Where, if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, the credit scoring and the credit models really came out of several years ago, where there needed to be a central way of determining credit worthiness. So that several different institutions, and we'll talk a little bit about that, who cares about our credit, who's looking at our credit. But there needed to be sort of a consistent way of being able to manage and monitor and to be able to determine the risk factors. And so these 3 creditors have kind of become the 3 main credit bureaus that are in place today.
So I guess, growing up, you just went down to mom and pop shop and they knew your parents and they thought you had good credit, but now we're a global economy. That's not going to get it done.
And credit is used for different things than it was before.
And you alluded to it. Who actually looks at our credit, and how can that affect me?
Well, I think we all know that when we go and walk into a retail store, that we apply for a credit card, that they're obviously pulling our credit. We also know that credit is needed for applying for a loan or a mortgage. But what we may not understand is that our employers also are looking at our credit. Utilities companies are looking at our credit. Cell phone companies are looking at our credit. And of course, if you want to rent a home or from an apartment. So landlords also are reviewing our credit. And I think the one area that is starting to get more and more important for us is the employer piece. It used to be that if you were employed in any type of financial institution or anything around money or government for a top secret clearance, you of course needed to have a credit as well as a criminal background check. But what I'm starting to see and hear is that even the mailroom clerk, so that any type of employment now, it's not necessarily designated for just some high profile type of employment. All other types of employments, or employers rather, are actually looking at credit.
So it's really not then about, when it deals with those, they're not really looking at the credit as it were, but they're saying, are you a person of integrity?
Absolutely.
Can we trust you to
Absolutely.
handle our resources?
Absolutely.
Is really the question that
Yeah.
they're asking themselves, and using that as a way to prove it. Right. So what are the factors that make up our credit score? What are the factors?
Well, there's basically a credit scoring models. Okay. And that's why, because the three bureaus that we just spoke about, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, because they're three separate companies, it is not uncommon that you actually are going to get three totally different scores.
And talk about that score, that range. Since we're talking about the score, what is that sort of range that they fall in?
Credit scores range anywhere from a 300 to an 850. Okay. And I've seen them all the way across the gamut. But that's basically the range. And there's no reason why we can't all be in the 800s. Right. But there are varying factors that impact that score. And I think what's really important for everyone to understand is, again, because the three bureaus are separate companies, the way that the information is reported can be reported differently. Therefore, it results in different scores.
Okay. And in all those factors of, how many credit cards, all those types of things, come into play.
There's just about 5 different factors that impact your credit score. Okay. There's payment history, there are amounts owed, there's types of credit, length of credit. Okay. And so when you're looking at that, 65% of that are amounts owed and payment history. Okay. So those are the things that catch us when we have collections, when we have late payments. Okay. So you can really get hurt substantially just from 65% of that.
Now, we're talking about this and this, credit report and all that. How do I see the thing? All I know is people are saying they go to the store, they go wherever, they apply for credit. Someone tells them, we check your credit and you're okay or you're not okay, and they're thinking, am I allowed to see that? Right. What's the deal with that?
Well, it's funny because credit reports quite honestly tell the story about you, and you're not able to have an interview. So when you walk into into a retail store and apply for credit, it's just the number that they're pulling from you, which is a Social Security number. That's going to come back and tell them whether or not they're going to be in a position to offer you credit. It isn't like you have an opportunity to go in the back and have an interview with the manager and tell them all about your hardship and your life story. But you can apply anytime that you are denied for whatever reason from a creditor. You are entitled to a free credit report from the three bureaus. Okay. You also, on an annual basis, can get a free credit report from annualcreditreport.com. Okay. And there are also hundreds, if not thousands, of online resources for you to actually also get a copy of your credit report.
All right. So then there's some people out there who say, well, I went in, applied for something, and they turned me down. So I requested a copy of my credit. Well, when I looked at my credit last year, my number was, 650, just picking a number out of that. And then they turned me down. And then when I got my credit this year, it was only 580. Right. So what did I do? I'm wondering.
Yeah, there are a number of things that could have happened. And I think the most important thing is we have to be diligent about monitoring our credit reports. On a minimum, once a year, you need to get a copy of your credit report and look at it thoroughly. 79% of consumer credit reports are inaccurate. They're flat out